It certainly looks like murder in cold blood. Two Russian soldiers approach a car dealership. The security guards come to speak to them, and after they turn their backs, are shot dead.
I can't watch the video now, but I will save it and leave it for my children and grandchildren, so they will know about this crime.
It is another example being assembled bit by a watching world of what look like war crimes being committed in Ukraine. Also on News at 10 tonight. The economy shrinks, so are we headed into recession? Joel asks the Chancellor why he won't do more.
And the difficulties that people face, Chancellor.
Of course I do, Joel. I'm out every week around the country.
So why aren't you doing more then?
We're doing a considerable amount, worth over £20 billion.
The Tetchy talks. Discussions with the EU about the Northern Ireland Protocol falter, which could mean a trade war just when we least need it. Austerity Mark II. The Prime Minister says he will slash civil service jobs. The Wagatha trial on the value of being honest. And 4 million times more massive than the Sun. A picture of the huge black hole at the centre of our galaxy that could prove Albert Einstein was right.
Every once in a while, you just have to pinch yourself and you're like, this is the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Like, you kind of forget that every once in a while, and that's pretty amazing.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. In time, investigators in Ukraine will gather evidence of war crimes committed by Russian soldiers. Many will go, sadly, unrecorded, but at least one has been preserved on a video for all the world to see. It happened outside a car dealership on the outskirts of Kyiv in the early days of the invasion. Against all the rules of war, two Russian soldiers shot two Ukrainian civilians in the back. One died straight away, the other managed to walk away, then bled slowly to death. What perhaps the soldiers didn't know was that they were being filmed by security cameras. Or perhaps they did and just didn't care. If so, what they did was as blatant as it was brutal, as we're about to see.
It is compelling evidence of a war crime committed by Russian troops in the early days of this conflict. Every moment caught on surveillance cameras as they approach a business unit outside Kyiv. The owner and his security guard go to meet them. They are searched for weapons. They give the soldiers cigarettes. But as the two unarmed men walk away, the troops reappear. They take aim and shoot them in the back. Bullets ricochet off the road. The battle for control of this main route into the capital had been fierce, but what happened here was a killing in cold blood. The security guard was 65-year-old Leonid Plyats, whose family say they want the world to know his fate.
I can't watch the video now, but I will save it and leave it for my children and grandchildren, so they will know about this crime and who our neighbors are.
Leonid survived the shooting and dragged himself back into his office. There he called for help, but by the time Ukrainian forces arrived, he had bled to death. Just one of some 300 killings documented by the United Nations in the area.
These killings of civilians often appear to be intentional, carried out by snipers and soldiers. Civilians were killed when crossing the road or leaving their shelters to seek food and water.
Ukrainian officials have announced the first prosecutions for war crimes of 3 captured Russian soldiers. But the killers of Leonid and his boss are not yet among them. They were last seen toasting the killing of 2 innocent civilians. John Ray, News at 10, Kyiv.
No matter how many times you see those scenes from this war, they never get any less horrifying and shocking, do they? Now, They do provide a sinister reflection on the inhumanity of Russian forces, but in the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol, it has been nigh on impossible to get an accurate picture of what has been happening there. Indeed, the United Nations said today the true scale has yet to be revealed. So tonight, we begin a series of reports inside Mariupol based on the often harrowing experiences of those who've got out and their accounts of those who have not.
Маріуполь – місто у Азовського моря з великим туристичним потенціалом.
A seaside city of greenery and art galleries and thriving industry. This version of Mariupol is now a memory. Today it is a black hole of fear and death where its citizens are fast becoming its diaspora. We've been to 3 countries to tell the story of the people of the city they left behind. 40,000 people have been deported from Mariupol. Dr. Viktor Soroka is one of them. His skills have never been so needed in the place he was forced to leave a few weeks ago. He made it here to Poland, but only just. This is his mother, who was taken with him into Russia. They were made to stay at a filtration camp filled with other Ukrainians moved from their homes. 600 miles from Ukraine, they were questioned for hours about their politics, their loyalties.
They gave you a food, and that's all. You can go out from that camp usually, and even if you go where you have, for example, no documents, no money, and you sat there like a dog or a cat waiting for food the whole day.
He knows what came of his old hospital, but wonders what happened to the patients left behind.
There was actually those women after the delivery with a newborn, and they was constantly crying. And it's so terrible.
Since the start of the invasion, 20,000 civilians have been killed in Mariupol. Dima and Timur Plotnikov are among them.
Як умру, то поховайте мене на могилі серед степу широкого на вкрайній милі.
Timur learned to recite this poem because he was taught that these words matter.
Як риви ревучі, як понесе з України у сине море.
When I am dead, bury me in my beloved Ukraine, he says.
Все покину і полину до самого Бога.
He could not have known how meaningful the message would become.
Поховайте та ставайте, кайдани порвіть.
Here's the destruction close to the spot where the 14-year-old hid with his parents to survive, boiling snow for drinking water. They filmed it before their escape.
We were down in the basement. He woke up. It was the last night. He said, "Mom, I've had a prophetic dream. Believe in it. In 3 days' time, I'll be able to use the internet on my phone again."
Timur's mother was with them as they drove to apparent safety in a civilian convoy. But then an explosion and flames. She was injured trying to rescue Timur.
Я хватала его за руки, за запястья, чтобы вытянуть. Он был придавлен, эта машина, которая упала.
I grabbed his forearm to pull him out.
Которую взорвали, в которую попали.
He'd been pushed to the ground by the car which had fallen on him. The car had exploded after being hit. I realized that I couldn't pull him out, and even if I could, he would be suffering for the rest of his life. I stopped. I looked while he was screaming. I just asked God to take him soon. He stopped feeling the pain at that moment.
Their family believed they were targeted. Targeted because they were civilians, because they were trying to leave.
He did not fulfill his plans or dreams for his life. That's why I believe they should be punished.
Hundreds of thousands have managed to escape the siege of the city, including Gusein Abdullayev. He's from Azerbaijan, but he came to Mariupol to study. He loved it here, the drama theatre especially, but it would become his shelter when the Russians came here too. Gusein tried to escape but was captured by Chechen fighters. He was forced to make a false statement to say he was a Ukrainian fighter, and he was tortured.
They started to beat me brutally. I was trying to curl up, but it still hurt me very much. They said, "Tell the truth." I said, "I am telling the truth. I'm a student." Then they brought in the electricity. They wrapped the end of the wire around my big toe and squeezed it, and said again, "Will you tell us the truth?"
He saw suspected Azov fighters being taken into another room.
They took them all to the torture room. I could hear all of them screaming. They took someone from the room right in front of ours and brought him into the torture room. We knew because we could hear everything, and I heard dreadful screaming. And then I heard 3 gunshots. Bang, bang, bang. And they didn't bring the man back to his room.
But a few hundred miles away, a friend was negotiating over the phone for his release.
Можно его как-то вот в Запорожье отправить? Его приду встречу в Запорожье.
Eventually, success. The captors let him go, but only because it was the holy month of Ramadan. After 26 days, he was free, except there is no freedom. Not when home is this. Rohit Katru, ITV News in Ukraine.
The fate and the uncertain futures and agonising stories of just a few of the survivors of Mariupol. OK, let's move on to some other news back here now. And the latest figures on the economy show it faltering already before some of the worst of the price rises on energy bills, for example, have even begun to work through. Growth has been even lower than expected. It was just 0.8% between January and March. Most of that, as you can see, was in January. In February, it effectively froze, and in March, output actually went down as bills went up and people cut back on their spending. Well, output is now above where it was before the pandemic, but with a possible recession on the horizon, what we produce as a country is likely to be heading only one way: down.
The Prime Minister in the Potteries, an away day with the Cabinet motivated by a desire to level up. The government wants the benefits of economic growth to be shared more evenly. The problem is the economy has stopped growing.
I know these are anxious times, and because what we're confronting are global inflationary forces, unfortunately I can't make them all disappear, but where we can make a difference, of course we are, which is why we're investing billions of pounds to support both families and businesses through the challenging months ahead.
A few miles from where the Chancellor was speaking, Tammy Sloan is reliant on the kindness of strangers.
Please can I have a cup of tea and some toast?
Food and energy bills have soared, and Tammy says her family can no longer afford the bare essentials. She relies on this community cafe and food bank for support.
I can choose to not put my heating on and then we're cold. I can choose not to take showers and then we're dirty. How are we supposed to maintain our personal level of dignity when we can't go out and get the things that we need, not necessarily things that we want, things that we need to survive?
Food banks report increasing demand as the UK heads into the biggest squeeze on its living standards in modern times. Inflation is high and rising, economic growth has stalled, and the government is under pressure to do more to protect those on the lowest incomes in particular.
Do you understand the difficulties that people face, Chancellor?
Of course I do, Joel. I'm out every week around the country.
So why aren't you doing more then? Because people are up against it, aren't they? And things are only going to get worse, and you keep saying you stand ready to do something, but you're not doing anything.
I don't think that's fair to say we're not doing anything. We're doing a considerable amount, worth over £20 billion.
But if you do not do more, 250,000 households will slide into debt and destitution, according to the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. Are you willing to just let that happen?
Of course I'm not willing to let that happen.
So what are you going to do?
And that's why we've put in place a considerable amount of help to make sure that that doesn't happen.
You are a very wealthy man, and there's nothing wrong with that. But do you think that possibly your wealth prevents you from really connecting with the difficulties, the everyday life difficulties that people are facing.
Over the past 2 years, I've done multiple things to support the economy in our country through some very difficult times. Actually, all the evidence shows that the people who benefited most from those interventions were people on lower and middle incomes.
Pressure on household budgets is set to intensify in the months ahead. The government hints that more help may be on the way, but there's no sign of it yet.
And Joel is here to talk about all this. Joel, I want to say to you, please give us some good news, but I don't think you're really going to, are you?
Well, look, all the evidence points very clearly to the fact we're heading into an extended, very painful period where we're going to see very high inflation and stagnating economic growth. Who knows if there'll be a technical recession? The point is that many, many households in the UK are going to feel very much poorer in the months to come. Now, the Chancellor today decided that he wanted to come forward and tell us all about the support that's on the table currently, and it is considerable, Tom. The point is, as the Resolution Foundation calculated most recently, a typical household faces a squeeze on their disposable income in real terms of about £1,000 at least this year. That is very, very, very significant. Now, within the Treasury, there is an acceptance privately that they're going to have to do something later on in the year. The Chancellor today pointed out that it's energy bills that are the driving force behind high inflation. They will rise again in October. As he points out, we don't yet know quite how much by, but he stands ready to do something. He was also there managing expectation. There's a limit, Tom. That's what he was saying to what I can do. I can numb the pain. I can shift it between income groups, but I can't take it away. This shock that we're facing of inflation, of high inflation, it will make us poorer.
OK, Joel, I feel like the last couple of years has been one piece of bad news after another, COVID, Ukraine, etc., etc., etc. And now for some good news. Oh no, more bad news. With a headache for the government and for the economy of Northern Ireland. Now, for that to improve, it needs the Stormont Assembly back up and running. That means, for Democratic Unionists, changes to the post-Brexit trade arrangement known as the Northern Ireland Protocol. You know where this is going already. But talks between the UK and the European Union about making any changes were described as tetchy by the Foreign Office. And Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, said if the EU wouldn't play ball, the UK would have no choice but to act. And Robert is here to discuss this more good news for us all tonight. What's going to happen? I mean, I guess we've got to be worried about some kind of trade war, as Joel was saying, just the last possible time we could conceivably need it. What's going to happen?
Well, it does look as though the UK is going to take unilateral action to suspend parts of this Northern Ireland Protocol, this agreement with the EU that we negotiated as we got out of the European Union that puts essentially an economic border down the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, which the unionist community in particular in the Northern Ireland hate, and that's why they're saying they're not going to join the new government unless this thing is ripped up. And Boris Johnson is now saying breaches the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, that historic agreement negotiated by Tony Blair, which brought peace to the island of Ireland after all those decades of terrorism and troubles. As you say, there were talks today between the Foreign Secretary and the EU negotiator, Šefčovič. They ended with the normal tit-for-tat war of words, Maroš Šefčovič saying if the UK takes the kind of action it's threatening to take, then they will have no option but to impose checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, and that would be the restoration of a hard border, and that would blow up the Good Friday Agreement, which Boris Johnson says is already being blown up. So it does all feel very bad. I mean, I can't remember the number of times you and I have talked about you know, the end of all possible cordial relationships between the UK and the EU when we were in the EU, now that we're on the outside. Quite often this brinkmanship leads to some kind of solution. I can't quite see what it is at the moment. Strikingly, and I think this is quite important, the EU, if we were to act in this way, would have the ability to launch a trade war, put tariffs on goods going from the UK to the EU. On my show last night, Jacob Rees-Mogg said, we wouldn't retaliate. They can have a trade war. Okay. We are going to continue to take their goods free. Brexit isn't working out quite the way we thought it was going to.
OK. Robert, thank you. Now, when the first 50-plus fines were issued by the police for parties in Downing Street during virus restrictions, the Prime Minister was one of them. In the latest 50, he is not. Still, more than 100 people is a lot, to say the least, and the police investigation is still going on. These fines are believed to relate to a Christmas party at Number 10 in 2020 that the Prime Minister didn't attend. Downing Street is now thought to have been the venue for more party fines than anywhere else in the UK. Sentences I once thought I would never read. Now, still on very serious matters, Finland's Prime Minister and President followed up that mutual defence deal agreed with the UK yesterday by saying their country should apply to join NATO straight away. Russia didn't like the sound of that one bit and warned of some form of military retaliation. Carl is in Moscow tonight.
The long and of late peaceful border between Russia and Finland is set to become a new frontier between Russia and NATO. The Ukraine conflict has destroyed the Finns' faith in their larger neighbour.
We cannot trust anymore in the way which we have maybe done beforehand, and that's why we have to think also our position again. So war is possible in Europe.
Public opinion has flipped rapidly away from neutrality towards NATO membership.
I think it's a very good decision because it's so important to be part of the NATO.
We need to consider about it really seriously, but I think that now is the best time to join NATO, if it's our opinion.
Russia currently shares land borders with 5 NATO allies, but the accession of Finland would increase Russia's direct frontier with NATO by over 800 miles, more than doubling it. So far, the response here has been one of carefully calibrated threat. The Kremlin saying it will all depend on how close NATO infrastructure is placed to Russia's borders. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying there would have to be some kind of retaliation of a technical military nature to protect Russia's security. Vladimir Putin claimed again this week that his so-called special operation in Ukraine was aimed at curbing NATO expansion. It has had the opposite effect. Carl Dinner, News at 10, Moscow.
Relations between parts of the civil service and certain government ministers have been tricky, some might say, for a while. Now we understand the government is preparing to cut their numbers over time by around 90,000. Their unions are warning that restrictions on this scale would affect the health service, border security and worsen problems in the passport office. Anushka has the details. Anushka, we're all familiar with government announcements, by all governments we should say, who turn out to be nothing like what they were promised to be at the time, for good or ill. And this is a lot of potential job losses. How seriously should we take it?
Well, they certainly want to massively reduce the headcount. It has grown a lot during Brexit and COVID. There have been talks before now, Tom, of large numbers being reduced. 65,000, Jacob Rees-Mogg has talked about before. What has changed this week is that sources tell me the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and Steve Barclay, his Chief of Staff, got together on Monday and they discussed actually putting this in place. And what they said is they want the civil service to go back to the 2015-2016 level. And if you look at that, you're talking about a reduction of 80, or as you say, 90,000 people. Now, at the moment, they are not talking about sacking anyone. They want to put in place a recruitment freeze. They want to make sure that vacancies are not filled in unless they have special permission from ministers, and then they want to move people around. And as you say, you could be cynical about that. How many people are you actually going to reduce in that way? They won't give me a deadline to when they want to do this. Some would see this more about political framing. We know there's already been tensions with the civil service over work from home. I've spoken to Dave Penman from the FDA union today. He says that it would affect the services that are being provided. Although at Cabinet, apparently Boris Johnson opened on this and said that he doesn't want to attack civil servants.
OK, Anushka, thank you very much indeed. Now, day 3 in the big libel trial, and Rebecca Vardy appeared to show the strain of the questioning from the lawyer of her former friend and fellow footballer's wife, Colleen Rooney. Indeed, at one point, the lawyer was actually ticked off by the judge. Mrs Vardy cried twice during her evidence. First, when the lawyer bridled after she'd pointed out he'd got her name wrong, and second, when he pointed out she had contradicted herself in accounts she had given.
Rebecca Vardy faced the cameras again ahead of a third day of evidence at the High Court. She has brought this libel action, but it's been her WhatsApp messages with agent Caroline Watt under scrutiny. In court, Vardy was asked about a photograph taken at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. She and her agent had arranged for a photographer to snap her at a hotel in St. Petersburg, but she denied orchestrating this group shot taken at a restaurant. Colleen Rooney's lawyer David Sherborne suggested you were perfectly happy for the staged photo to take place, perfectly happy for Caroline Watt to do the dirty, as long as the dirt doesn't come back on you. Not true, said Mrs. Vardy. In October 2019, Colleen Rooney claimed she'd caught Vardy leaking fake stories about her to the press through her private Instagram account. They included one story that was published in The Sun about a flood at her house. Rebecca Vardy said she didn't recall seeing Colleen Rooney's final fake post about a flooded basement in October 2019, but the court heard that a letter from her solicitors 4 months later stated that she did remember seeing it. Rebecca Vardy said there was a lot of abuse at the time before crying in the witness box. As the court took a 5-minute break, she put her head in her hands on the desk. As he finished his cross-examination, David Sherborne said, "In your second witness statement, you blame her," meaning Caroline Watt. "I put it to you, Mrs. Vardy, it's not her who betrayed you, as you suggest. It is you who has betrayed her by throwing her under the bus." "That's not true," was her reply.
Did you throw Caroline under the bus, Rebecca?
Rebecca Vardy had earlier denied lying after her witness statements had been changed in the run-up to the trial. Colleen Rooney is expected to give evidence tomorrow. Her husband Wayne will also be called as a witness during the trial. Martha Fairley, News at 10 at the Royal Courts of Justice.
In the past few minutes, it's been announced that the cancer campaigner, Deborah James, has been made a dame. The podcast host said on Monday that she'd left hospital and was now having end-of-life care at home. A statement from Downing Street said the Queen was pleased to confer the honour of damehood. The fundraising campaign Deborah launched 3 days ago has now raised almost £4 million. Finally, not for the first time, we've been reminded what a remarkably clever guy the scientist Albert Einstein was. His 21st century successors today revealed a photograph of a big black hole at the heart of our galaxy, which his theory of general relativity predicted. And by big, I mean really big, 4 million times more massive than our sun.
It's what scientists think may be the glue that holds our galaxy together. And from the darkness, for the first time, an image of Sagittarius A star, the massive black hole at the heart of our own Milky Way galaxy.
Every once in a while, you just have to pinch yourself and you're like, this is the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Like, you kind of forget that every once in a while, and that's pretty amazing.
Even more amazing when you consider that a black hole is actually a collection of densely packed material created after a star much bigger than the sun has died and collapsed in on itself. It has a gravitational pull so strong that nothing can escape from it, not even light. It's around 27,000 light years away, and so to capture it, astronomers created a massive network of 8 observatories around the globe, effectively one giant telescope.
As a species, we've been gazing into the sky above us for thousands of years, gradually learning more and more about the universe that surrounds us. Today's image reinforces the theories about the workings of the universe.
But capturing it was far from easy.
This is phenomenally challenging because the system that you're looking at is evolving as time goes on, as you're trying to collect and process that data. So it's a bit like taking a picture of something that is moving. If you try and snap a shot of somebody running around, it's going to be blurry. And that's one of the problems they essentially had with this. And unpicking that is another of the achievements.
And the path of discovery doesn't end here.
So I think that for us as a civilization, I think it's an incredible milestone that we're able to see this cosmic wonder in all of its glory and be able to capture an image of something which is ordinarily well beyond our perception. And this is, I think, just the first step, and there'll be so much more exciting news in the years to come.
More glimpses from afar, giving us a clearer picture of how our galaxy came to be and how it will continue to evolve. Deborah Cohen, News at 10.
That's it for tonight. If you've got a moment tomorrow going to work, walking the dog, do download and listen to our What You Need to Know podcast. I had a fascinating chat with the great Belfast analyst Eamon Malley. But that's it. Sorry the news wasn't better, but good night. Thanks for watching.